Marilyn swiped her badge through the reader and pushed open the heavy glass door of Brightwood and Associates. The heels of her shoes tapped softly on the marble floor of the lobby. The day had been a success. The presentation of the project for the reconstruction of the historic Richmond Hill neighborhood had gone brilliantly. 3 months of sleepless nights, arguments with contractors, and revisions hadn't gone to waste. The city council had unanimously approved the project. In the elevator, she undid the top button of her austere jacket and closed her eyes. Fatigue came in waves, but it was pleasant, the kind that comes after a big victory. Marilyn imagined how now she would come home, take a hot bath with her favorite lavender salt, and then she and Theodore would open a bottle of red and sit on the terrace for a long time, discussing her success. The telephone in her bag suddenly trilled. It was Mrs. Page, my mother's neighbor from Portland. "Marilyn, darling, you must come. Eleanor had a microstroke. She's in the hospital, stable, but—" Marilyn felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. Her mother, so strong, so powerful, so unyielding, and suddenly a hospital. She struggled to focus on Mrs. Page's words, promised to call back, and pressed hang up. When Marilyn entered her and Theodore's 2-story house in the suburbs, the first thing she noticed was the smell, the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume. She sniffed. No, it was just a whiff. The light was on in the living room, and the clinking of dishes came from the kitchen. "Theo?" she called out, kicking off her shoes. Her husband came out, wiping his hands with a kitchen towel. Tall, trim, in homemade jeans and a t-shirt. That was the way she liked him best. But something was wrong. Theodore looked unusually tense, like a taut string. "How was the presentation?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Great. A complete success." Marilyn sank heavily onto the couch. "Theo, Mom's in the hospital, a microstroke." She expected to see sympathy, concern on his face, but Theodore was strangely animated. "You need to go right away." "What?" Marilyn raised her eyebrows in surprise. "But you know what an important period this is at work. The project has just been approved. The realization begins. Come on. The team can manage without you for a couple weeks. It's your mother." Marilyn looked at her husband carefully. 12 years of marriage had taught her to read the slightest change in his mood. There was an unfamiliar note in his voice now, a kind of feverish excitement. "Usually, you're the first to object to my trips to Mom's," she said slowly. "The situation is different." Theodore was already pulling out her traveling suitcase from the mezzanine. "I'll book a ticket for tomorrow." The next hour passed like a blur. Theodore helped her pack with an uncharacteristic enthusiasm, glancing at his watch every now and then. Marilyn mechanically put clothes, cosmetics, and medicines into the suitcase. Her mind was spinning with scraps of thoughts about her mother, about her work, about her husband's strange behavior. Already in the bedroom, pulling out a warm sweater from the closet, she accidentally hit the door of the dressing table. The door opened, and Marilyn noticed that her favorite perfume was out of place. She remembered that she always put the bottle on the right side. A small thing, but for some reason it was the detail that made her wary. Before going to bed, she checked the home camera settings through an app on her phone. Marilyn had installed a video surveillance system a year ago when she'd started collecting rare architectural scrapbooks. 4 cameras covered the main rooms of the house. Everything worked properly. At night, Marilyn hardly slept at all. Theodore lay next to her, pretending to be asleep, but she could feel his tension. Toward morning, he got up earlier than usual and prepared breakfast. Another alarm bell. In their 12 years together, he had rarely spoiled her with culinary feats. They drove his car to the train station. Marilyn settled in the passenger seat and immediately smelled him, the same aroma of an unfamiliar perfume. She glanced at her husband but remained silent. The parting was strange. Theodore pecked her on the cheek, mumbled something about how he would be busy with work and might not answer the phone. Marilyn stared after his hurriedly receding figure, and an emptiness grew inside. In the train car, she pulled out her phone and opened their wedding picture. Young, happy, in love. Was this really them? The conductor announced departure. The train started, taking Marilyn toward the unknown, and her mother's voice sounded in her head for the first time in a long time. "Daughter, you're too trusting. One day it's going to come back to bite you." Perhaps that moment had come. Marilyn clutched her phone in her hand and opened the camera app. Now all that was left to do was wait. Marilyn sat in the hospital room, absent-mindedly watching her sleeping mother. Eleanor's condition was better than she had feared. The doctors were talking about moderate risk and a favorable prognosis. The phone in her pocket vibrated. A notification came in from her home camera about movement in the living room. She opened the app and froze. A woman she didn't know was walking through her and Theodore's house, her heels tapping carelessly on the parquet floor. Tall, with her dark hair carelessly gathered into a ponytail, dressed in tight leggings and a short top, she was unceremoniously studying the interior, running her fingers over the furniture. "So this is what you look like," Marilyn muttered, staring at the screen. Theodore appeared next, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He looked both embarrassed and excited, like a teenager on a first date. "It's a beautiful house," the stranger said in a slight Texas accent. "Just a little too sterile, like a museum." She walked over to the mantelpiece where framed photographs stood. Marilyn and Theodore's wedding photo, their trip to Italy, the day they moved into this house. The woman picked up one frame, twirled it defiantly in her hands. "Raven, maybe we shouldn't," Theodore began uncertainly. "It is, sweetheart." She opened the frame and pulled out a photograph. "You can't start a new life with the ghosts of the old one around." The picture went into the trash can. It was followed by a second, a third. Theodore shifted from foot to foot, but didn't stop her. Marilyn stared at the screen, feeling a cold rage boiling up inside. 12 years of married life was being thrown in the trash with a careless movement of manicured fingers. Raven, meanwhile, made her way up to the second floor. She swung open the closet doors in the bedroom and snorted contemptuously, eyeing Marilyn's business suits. "God, doesn't she wear anything sexy at all?" Raven pulled out a gray pantsuit. "How did you live with that businesswoman, honey?" Theodore chuckled nervously. "Marilyn is a good person." "Of course she is," Raven interrupted. "So good that you had an affair with the first yoga instructor you saw." She stepped toward him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "But I'm not the first girl you met, am I? You and I are special." Marilyn cringed as she watched this woman kiss her husband in their bedroom. On their bed. The camera impartially recorded Raven pulling down her top, Theodore greedily kissing her neck, them sinking onto the bed. "Wait," Theodore suddenly realized. "We should at least change the underwear." "Right," Raven murmured. "No traces of a past life." She went to the bathroom and came back with a pile of red underwear. "Bought it just for us? Your ex probably slept in your grandmother's cotton nighties." "Ex?" Marilyn nearly dropped the phone. "So that's what you're calling me already, Theo?" For the next hour, she forced herself to watch Raven methodically destroy the traces of her presence in the house. Makeup went in the trash. Her favorite robe was crumpled and tossed into a corner. Family photos disappeared from the walls. Theodore watched this act of vandalism listlessly, occasionally muttering weak protests. By evening, the house had been transformed. Screaming decorative pillows were everywhere, garish figurines on the tables, and gaudy pink towels in the bathroom. Raven was busily arranging her framed photos, humming something to herself. "This is the place to live now," she said, flopping down on the couch and putting her feet up on the coffee table. "No more ghosts of the past." Marilyn turned off the phone and closed her eyes. The room was quiet with only the beeping of medical equipment. Her mother mumbled something in her sleep and turned on her side. "You're overplaying your hand, Theo," Marilyn thought to herself. "And you, sweet Raven, are sorely mistaken. I am not a ghost. I am more than real, and you'll find that out soon enough." She pulled out her laptop and began creating a folder of videos. Day 1. The key was not to leave anything out. Raven meticulously studied her reflection in the gym mirror. 6 years ago, she'd first stepped through the threshold of this fitness center, trembling and unsure, wearing cheap second-hand clothes. Today, she's wearing a branded yoga suit and she's the lead instructor, or used to be, until recently. She remembered the day she'd first seen Theodore. He was interviewing a new trainer standing at the reception desk in a perfectly fitting suit. His commanding demeanor, his expensive cufflinks, the careless gesture with which he placed the keys to his Lexus on the counter all screamed prosperity and success. Just like Howard, Raven thought then, remembering her ex-husband. Howard had come into her life when she was 22 and working as a waitress in a rundown Houston bar. A solid 60-year-old businessman who owned a chain of car dealerships, he seemed like a ticket to a better life. The mansion, the designer clothes, the jewelry, it was so different from her childhood in a trailer park with a mother who drank her last dime. "Raven, baby, get mommy another beer," a husky voice called out in the memory. "Don't play hard to get, you know we're broke." The marriage to Howard lasted 8 months. He wanted an obedient doll who would silently tolerate his senile quirks and keep him company at business dinners. Raven wanted more than that. The divorce left her with some money, enough to move to another city and start a new life. Theodore was different. Younger, more successful, more attractive, and married, but that only added to the excitement. "Mr. Abbott," she murmured then, accidentally bumping into him in the hallway. "Could you evaluate my new yoga program? Your opinion is so important to me," he agreed. Of course he agreed. What man could resist the opportunity to watch a young, flexible woman in a tight suit for an hour? Raven performed the asanas slowly, feeling his gaze. She knew her strengths. She had a chiseled figure, long legs, the ability to create the illusion of fragility and defenselessness. "You're so tense, Mr. Abbott," she said after class. "Have you been working a lot?" "Yes. The last few months have been difficult. You know, I have a special exercise program to relieve stress. One-on-one sessions." He didn't hesitate long. A week later, they met at her rented apartment. "Call me Theo," he said, awkwardly adjusting his shirt collar. Raven had researched his wife on social media. Marilyn Abbott, 34, successful architect. Smart, driven, from a good family, perfect, nauseatingly perfect. "She doesn't understand you at all," Raven whispered, massaging his shoulders. "Always busy with work, isn't she? And you need attention, need affection." Theodore melted under her hands, pouring out his soul. A marriage without passion, a workaholic wife, always talking about projects and deadlines. "A woman like you deserves better," he said as they lay in bed. "You could lead group programs, open your own studio." Raven smiled dreamily. She knew exactly what she wanted, everything. A house in an upscale neighborhood, status, respect, everything that Marilyn had now. When they learned of Marilyn's mother's illness, Raven knew it was a chance. "Theo, honey," she said, looking up at him, "I can't hide anymore. I need a real life, a real relationship." He hesitated, but she knew how to push. "Or are you not sure how you feel? Maybe I should find someone who's really ready to be with me." 2 days later, Marilyn left for Portland. "This house is so cold," Raven said, entering it for the first time. "It's like a museum. There's no love here, just a picture for a glossy magazine." She was methodically eradicating traces of Marilyn's presence, marking the grounds. Theodore watched anxiously, but didn't stop. He had always been weak in front of strong women. In the evening, lying in their bed, Raven went over her victories in her mind. A house, yes. A man, yes. All that remained was to get rid of the last ghosts of the past and consolidate her success. "What are you thinking about?" Theodore asked sleepily. "About our future, darling." She kissed him gently on the cheek. "We're going to have a wonderful life." He smiled and closed his eyes. Raven stared at the ceiling, mentally making a to-do list. Tomorrow she would register at the local elite fitness club. She needed to start building her reputation in the neighborhood. Then she'd work on her wardrobe, no more cheap brands. And in a month, she'd hint to Theodore that it would be a good idea to put the house in her name, for safety's sake, of course. "I'm sorry, Marilyn," she thought with a chuckle, "but I deserve this life more than you do. I fought for it." She didn't realize that her every move, every word was being recorded on cameras, and that the real fight was yet to come. The old Victorian house greeted Marilyn with creaking floorboards and the smell of medicine. Eleanor had insisted on being discharged from the hospital. "I can't stand these walls." Now she was half reclining in her favorite armchair by the window, wrapped in a woolen blanket, watching her daughter intently. "You've lost weight," she remarked as Marilyn arranged her medications on the bedside table. "And that's not a compliment. At your age, thinness makes you look old." Marilyn silently continued to organize the pills into containers. "Some things don't change. My mother will always find something to complain about." "And that hair." Eleanor pressed her lips together. "Why did you cut your hair? You had such a gorgeous bob." "Mom, that was 15 years ago." "So, beauty never goes out of style." Marilyn looked at her reflection in the antique mirror. Short haircut, tight suit, tired eyes. When had she gotten so businesslike? In the evening, going through old photo albums, she came across a picture from 20 years ago. A young girl in a summer dress, hair loose, laughing at the camera. Next to her is a young Eleanor, as beautiful and cold as an antique statue. "I'd just gotten a promotion at the bank," her mother said, peering over her shoulder. "Your father insisted that I quit my job and take over the house. We used to fight about it a lot." Marilyn remembered those fights. Her father yelled that his wife had traded her family for a career. Eleanor would silently pack her briefcase and go to the office, and little Marilyn sat in her room with her hands over her ears. "You know," Eleanor said suddenly, "I loved him, in my own way, but I didn't know how to put it all together." She paused, looking at the photograph. "Maybe if I had been wiser, but I was so afraid of losing myself, of dissolving into the role of wife and mother." Marilyn shuddered. How many times had Theodore said almost the same words to her? "You only live for work. We're like neighbors. You're never around." "And then he left," Eleanor continued, "to his secretary. So, homely, cozy. She baked cookies and wore colorful dresses." Like Raven, Marilyn thought, remembering the pink towels and decorative pillows. The next days blended into a routine. Shots, pills, treatments. Eleanor was cranky, refusing food, demanding attention. And at night, Marilyn watched the tapes from the home cameras, watching a stranger's behavior in her house. One day, rummaging through the pantry for an old tonometer, she came across a box of her mother's diaries. Shabby notebooks in leather covers, scribbled in small handwriting. "John made a scene over my business trip again," Marilyn read. "Says I'm ruining the family. What does he want? For me to stay home and make soup? That's not why I got an education." Page after page is the story of a woman torn between family and career, fears, doubts, loneliness. Today was the presentation of the new project. I came back late. Marilyn was already asleep. She left me a drawing of the family on a picnic. She drew herself between me and my father, holding our hands. If only it were that simple. Marilyn closed the journal and leaned against the wall. Something strange was going on in her soul, as if the pieces of the mosaic were finally coming together to form a picture. She'd always wanted to be different, different from her mother, to build a relationship, not a career. But she'd ended up going down the same path, successful, independent, single. And Theodore, like his father, sought solace in a woman who was the opposite of his wife. "I found your diaries," she told her mother at dinner. Eleanor froze with fork in hand. "And what do you think?" I think we've both made mistakes." "You know what the funny thing is?" Eleanor grinned sadly. "I really believed I was doing the right thing, building a career, securing a future. And in the end, I'm alone in this big house." "Mom, no. Let me finish." She straightened up in her chair, becoming that bossy woman from her memories again. "I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. But I don't want you to betray yourself. There has to be some kind of balance, you know?" Marilyn nodded. Balance. That's what was missing in her life. A balance between work and personal, between strength and weakness, between I and we. At night, she opened the camera app again. Raven was asleep in her bed, sprawled out on the bed like a hostess. Theodore lay on the edge, turned away from the wall. "You're wrong, sweetheart," Marilyn thought to herself. "Taking my place in the house is easy. Becoming me, however, is not, because I'm no longer the woman whose place you're trying to take." She pulled out her laptop and started writing a letter to the lawyer. It was time to act. "Mrs. Abbott, let's be clear again." Attorney Gerald McCormick tapped his pen on the table. "Do you have videotape evidence of the affair?" "More than enough." Marilyn opened her laptop. "Every day for the last 2 weeks, time-stamped and audio." McCormick whistled as he looked through the files. "And they didn't even notice the camera? Raven's too busy changing my house to suit herself." Marilyn grinned unfunnily. "And Theodore? He's never been interested in technical details. With material like this, we could demand very favorable divorce terms." Marilyn shook her head. "Not yet. I want to check something." Back at her mother's house, she opened a joint bank account for her and Theodore. The password hadn't changed since their honeymoon, the date they'd first met. How predictable. She placed her first order at an exotic plant store, rare orchids with home delivery. Theodore hated flowers, considered them a waste of money. "I hope Raven appreciates it," Marilyn thought as she picked out the most expensive specimens. Next was a collection of vintage lingerie, lace corsets, stockings, garters, all black, all a size smaller than Raven wore. The order note said, "Can't wait to try on." The phone vibrated. Theodore. Marilyn muted it. Let him be nervous. An hour later, a courier delivered the orchids. Cameras captured Raven's perplexed look at the flowers. "Theo, did you order?" I could hear the irritation in her voice. "I told you, I'm allergic." "No." Theodore frowned, looking at the order card. "This is from our joint account with Marilyn." "What? Why does she still have access to it?" "Because it's my account, dearie," Marilyn muttered as she surveyed the scene. That evening, she posted a photo to Instagram, an old snapshot of their bedroom, where a traditional African ritual ornament hung on the wall. The caption read, "Some traditions cannot be broken. Retribution comes inevitably." An hour later, her bureau assistant called. "Marilyn, are you okay? Theodore called, asked if you'd been in touch with any of the local, African cult specialists. Tell him I'm too busy taking care of my sick mother." Next was an order from an esoteric goods store, candles, incense, some amulets, all with delivery to their house. The cameras showed Raven squeamishly holding the black candles. "I think your wife is going crazy." Theodore nervously adjusted his collar. "It's not like her. Maybe she suspects something." Raven's voice became hysterical. "You said she doesn't know anything." She doesn't know. She can't know. Marilyn texted her husband. I've been having weird dreams lately. I've been dreaming about you. And her. Can't remember details, just the color red everywhere. Hope you're doing well. The phone exploded with calls. She didn't answer a single one. The next evening, a courier delivered a box of underwear. Raven threw it against the wall angrily. She's kidding me. That size, those notes. Do something. I'm trying to contact her. Try harder. And block her access to the account. Theodore went to the bank. He came back angry. I can't. The account is in her name. I only have access. Marilyn smiled as she looked at the screen. Theodore had always been so busy with the business that he trusted her completely with the financial matters, including handling all the accounts. There was a new photo on Instagram, a vintage voodoo doll from her antique shelf. Caption: Found it in my mom's stuff. They say dolls like this keep family secrets and punish you for breaking them. The cameras showed Raven scurrying around the house, checking closets and drawers. Where's the damn doll? She can't have taken it. Calm down. Theodore poured himself a whiskey. It's just an old photo. Just a photo? And the underwear? And the flowers? And those creepy candles? She knows something, Theo. Marilyn's not interested in all that mystical nonsense. People change. Raven grabbed her phone. I Googled this African stuff. There are such curses out there. Marilyn closed her laptop. That was enough for today. Tomorrow she'd order a collection of antique dolls. Have Raven look for the magical one among them. I'm sorry, Mom, she thought, looking at Eleanor sleeping. I know you taught me to be above it. But sometimes revenge isn't just a sweet dish. It's a way to teach a lesson. She pulled out her phone and dialed a new message to Theodore. Dreamed about our bedroom today and blood on the white sheets. Must be a sign. Take care of yourself, darling, and her too. The phone rang almost instantly. Marilyn smiled and muted it. The game was just beginning. Raven woke up in the middle of the night to a strange sound. It was like someone was walking down the second-floor hallway, slow, heavy footsteps. She listened, peering into the darkness of the bedroom. Theodore was asleep, sleeping softly. The footsteps approached the door, stopped. Silence. Theo, she shook him by the shoulder. Theo, wake up! What? He lifted his head sleepily. There's someone there. Theodore turned on the bedside lamp and grimaced at the bright light. I don't hear anything. It's quiet now, but I definitely heard footsteps. He stood up with a sigh and checked the house. No one. All the doors were locked. The alarm was on. You were dreaming, he said, climbing back into bed. Go back to sleep. But Raven couldn't sleep. Something had changed in the house in the last few days. There was a sense of someone else's presence, as if someone invisible were watching their every move. In the morning, she noticed that the elephant statue on the mantelpiece was turned the other way. She remembered exactly. Yesterday, the trunk had been facing left. Now it was to the right. Did you touch the elephant? She asked the housekeeper. No, ma'am. I just dusted, didn't move anything. By evening, Raven was on edge. First, her favorite scarf went missing, found in the bathroom, though she definitely left it in the bedroom. Then the study door had slammed shut on its own, and now this bloody statue. Theo, I can't go on, she said at dinner. We need to redecorate. What? Why? A complete makeover. Repaint the walls, change the furniture. There's something wrong here. Theodore put his fork down. Raven, you're getting yourself worked up. It's just an old house. It has its own sounds. Sounds? She laughed hysterically. And the footsteps at night? And the things that move on their own? And those creepy gifts from your wife? Ex-wife, he corrected, but he was unsure. Yeah? Then why haven't you filed for divorce? Why does she still have access to the accounts? Why? The sound of breaking glass interrupted her tirade. The picture frame in the living room had fallen and shattered on its own, the same one where Raven had put the photo of them together. "There!" She jumped up, pointing a trembling finger at the shards. "There! Did you see it?" Theodore stared at the broken frame in silence. Something trembled in his face, the first shadow of doubt. Raven lay awake that night, scrolling through Marilyn's Instagram. Black candles, voodoo dolls, African amulets. Was it a coincidence or a message? She opened old photos, business suits, architectural designs, minimalist interiors. No mysticism, no hints. "What happened to you?" Raven thought, looking at Marilyn's photo. "What are you playing at?" Theodore's phone jingled a new message. Raven squinted her eyes at the screen. "Saw the future today. There was a lot of red. And you. And her. Especially her." Theodore abruptly turned his phone off. His hands shook faintly. Raven was alone in the big, quiet house. A house that seemed to be watching her with 100 invisible eyes. Somewhere upstairs, footsteps sounded again. Theodore sat in his office at the fitness center, staring mindlessly at a photograph on his desk. His and Marilyn's wedding was the moment when he felt truly victorious. A beautiful, successful woman had chosen him. Him, not one of those glossy architects who hovered around her. A call from his father interrupted his musings. "I hear Marilyn's gone to her mother's?" Victor Abbott's voice, as always, sounded mildly contemptuous. "I hope you didn't do anything stupid, son." Theodore wrinkled his nose. Son. Even now, at 42, his father spoke to him as if he were an unreasonable child. "You've always had a tendency to act rashly," Victor continued. "Remember when you almost failed your final exams at Yale? If it hadn't been for my intervention—" "Dad, I have a meeting in 5 minutes." "Sure. Your little Jim. So, worthy business for the heir to the Abbott empire." Theodore hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair. His childhood flashed before his eyes. The huge mansion in Greenwich, his father's eternal lectures, his mother hiding her anxiety behind a social smile. Abbots don't lose. Abbots don't show weakness. Abbots deserve better. These mantras had haunted him since childhood. When he announced he wouldn't be going to his father's law firm but would open a fitness center, there was an uproar. "A gym?" the father ranted. "My son is going to be a trainer at a gym?" Theodore still insisted. He took out a loan, not from his father, from the bank. He rented a place, worked 18 hours a day. Then he met Marilyn. She came to check out the place. Her office was remodeling the building. She was tall, confident, with her hair in a careless bun. "You have an interesting concept," she said, studying the layout. "But you could do better." And she did. Under her guidance, the gym was transformed into a high-end fitness center. Theodore fell in love with her intelligence, her independence, the way she could turn ideas into reality. When he proposed, his father praised him for the first time. "You've finally done something right." She came from a good family, with prospects. The first years of the marriage were happy ones. Marilyn helped develop a network of fitness centers, invented new directions, attracted the right people. And then she became too successful. Her projects won awards. She was invited to international conferences. She was written about in professional journals. "How's your genius wife doing?" my father used to ask me when we met. "They say her new project has made a sensation." And Theodore felt like that unlucky boy who never lived up to expectations. The first fling had happened at a corporate party. A young receptionist, admiring glances, compliments on his business acumen. Marilyn was at a conference in Europe at the time. Then there was a Pilates instructor, followed by a sales manager. Short connections, nothing serious. A way to feel important, successful, worthy. Raven was different. She looked up to him, caught his every word, needed his protection and support. But most importantly, she idolized his business, what her father called the gym. "You've built an empire," she said. "You're incredible." And he believed it, wanted to be the man she saw in him. The phone rang again. Raven. "Theo, honey, there's that sound again. And I found a candle on the table. Can you come over?" He could hear the fear in her voice, but underneath that fear was steel. She wouldn't give up. She'd fight for her place in his life, like Marilyn, like a mother, like all the strong women he loved and feared at the same time. And the messages from his wife kept coming, mysterious, unsettling, hitting a sore spot. "Remember what your father said at our wedding. The important thing is not to disappoint the family. I wonder what he'll say now." Theodore poured himself a whiskey. His father's voice echoed in his head. "The Abbotts don't lose." But for the first time in his life, he didn't know what winning meant. Raven's love was like a drug, intoxicating, stupefying, making him feel like a hero. Marilyn's respect was like air, necessary, familiar, imperceptible until you started to choke. He took another sip of whiskey and dialed Raven's number. "I'll be there soon." But deep down, he knew that no matter what happened next, he'd lost. He'd lost to himself. A cup of coffee in his favorite cafe on Portland Street cooled down, but Marilyn hardly noticed it. She listened attentively to the man sitting across from her, Howard Kingsley, Raven's ex-husband. "I saw an article in the paper about your new project, Mrs. Abbott." He nervously adjusted the knot of his tie. "And your husband's name on the list of sponsors. When I found out that you'd left town, and he—" Howard paused, searching for words. "And he's living with Raven in my house," Marilyn finished calmly. "I should warn you. Raven is a dangerous woman, not because of her strength, but because of her weaknesses." At 65, Howard looked young, well-groomed, trim, with the alert gaze of a successful businessman, not the rich old man Raven described him as. "Did she tell your husband her version of our marriage?" Howard pulled a folder out of his briefcase. "About how I oppressed and controlled her? Here, take a look." Marilyn flipped through the documents. Bank statements, clinic bills, therapist reports. "Raven has serious mental problems," Howard said quietly. "Pathological fear of the supernatural, borderline personality disorder. She may appear strong, but inside she's a scared child who believes in ghosts and curses." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she'll ruin your husband, like she tried to ruin me, not with mysticism, but with earthly means, manipulation, lies, the gradual appropriation of my property. And when I began to resist—" He was silent, staring out the window. "Then what? She staged a suicide attempt. The unfortunate victim of domestic violence couldn't take the abuse. If it wasn't for the house camera footage and the maid's testimony, I'd be going to jail." Marilyn felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered her cameras silently recording Raven's every move in her house. "I'm not going to retaliate or hurt her," Howard added, "but you should know who you're dealing with, especially," he paused, "especially if you decide to make a difference." That same evening, Theodore received an anonymous letter. Medical reports, witness statements, photographs. The story of a woman whose fears and complexes drove her to desperate acts. Marilyn watched through the cameras as he read the documents. How his face changed, his hands trembling as he poured the whiskey. And a plan was already forming in her head. If Raven was so afraid of the otherworldly, well, maybe it was worth giving her a reason to be afraid. Raven paced Theodore's office nervously. She hadn't slept much the last few days, every rustle in the house making her flinch, every shadow seeming ominous. And now, trying to find a sedative in her desk drawer, she came across a folder of documents, projects, contracts, estimates. Raven was about to put the papers away when her eyes caught on a strange figure. $1,200,000. The amount deposited into Marilyn's account a month ago. What the? She muttered, reading the small text. Remuneration for a redevelopment project in the historic district. Marilyn Abbott's personal account. And a note in pencil, not to be included in the family declaration. Raven's hands shook as she photographed the documents. There it was. Proof that the perfect Marilyn wasn't so flawless. Income concealment, tax evasion. Theodore came home late, smelling of whiskey and fatigue. We need to talk. Raven placed the photos of the documents in front of him. Your wife is doing some kind of tax fraud. Theodore looked at the papers and turned pale. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter. The important thing is that now we have leverage. We can... We? He stood up abruptly. You went through my files? I was looking for the pills. Raven raised her voice. What difference does it make? The main thing is that you violated my privacy. Theodore slammed his fist on the table. What right did you have to... Right? Raven laughed hysterically. What right did your wife have to hide her income? We can use it. Make her give up the house, Shut up, Theodore shouted. This is my business and my wife. Your wife? Raven grabbed a crystal paperweight off the table. Still your wife? The paperweight flew into the wall, shattering into 1,000 pieces, followed by the vase, then the desk lamp. Raven, stop it! Theodore tried to grab her arms. Don't touch me! She broke free and grabbed the next item, an antique clock. You think I can't see? You still love her. All that, my wife, my business. What am I? A temporary distraction? The clock crashed on the mantelpiece. Theodore looked at the mayhem, and something changed in his gaze. It was as if a veil were falling from his eyes. You know, he said in an unusually calm voice, Marilyn never threw a tantrum, even when she had the right to. Raven froze with the picture frame raised for a throw. It's Marilyn again. Always Marilyn, the perfect, infallible. No, Theodore interrupted. Not perfect, just worthy. The word hit Raven harder than a slap. She slowly lowered her hand from the picture frame. So that's it? I'm not worthy? I didn't say that. But I thought it. She threw the picture frame on the floor. It's okay. I know what to do. I'll go to the IRS tomorrow. Let's see how dignified your wife will be with a criminal case. Theodore silently took out his cell phone and dialed a number. Taxi service? I need a car. What? Raven froze in confusion. Are you kicking me out? No, I'm calling a cab for myself. This is still Marilyn's house, and I have no right to kick you out. He rubbed his eyes tiredly. But I can't take it anymore. All this. Theo, wait! She rushed to him. I didn't mean to. These documents, these sounds in the house, these strange messages. I'm just going crazy. Stay, please. But Theodore was already going upstairs to pack. For the first time in a month, his head was clear. He thought of Marilyn, of her quiet confidence, of the way she had built their business together, never demanding recognition for her accomplishments, about how idiotic he'd been to trade that for a passionate affair. Raven thrashed around the living room, continuing to smash things. Somewhere upstairs, the same footsteps came, again slow, heavy footsteps. She screamed and threw the candlestick down the stairs. And for the first time, Theodore didn't rush to comfort her. He was putting shirts into his suitcase and thinking about how he would explain everything to Marilyn, if she wanted to listen to him at all. A cab pulled up outside the window. After the night's tantrum, Raven had talked Theodore into staying, promising to pull himself together. But in the morning, everything had changed. Trying to dust the bookshelf in her study, she was trying to show she could be a good hostess. Raven accidentally touched the spine of an old folio. The book swayed oddly, and she noticed the glint of a glass lens behind it. Her heart skipped a beat. With trembling hands, she pulled the book out. There was a miniature camera mounted in the wall, aimed directly at the desk. "Theo!" Her scream echoed through the house. "Theo, get up here!" Theodore ran up the stairs. "What's wrong?" "That's what happened." Raven pointed at the camera. "She's been following us all this time." Theodore turned pale. All the intimate moments, all the conversations, all the plans they'd made in that office flashed through his mind. "Could it be an old security system?" he suggested uncertainly. "Let's check the other rooms." For the next hour they searched the house. A camera was found in the living room, camouflaged among the decorations on the wall. Another in the bedroom, hidden in the air vent. A fourth in the dining room. "That's why she left so quietly." Raven bit her lips nervously. "That's why those strange messages were so precise. She saw everything, every move we made." At that moment, a message from Marilyn arrived on Theodore's phone. Short video. Raven throws the pictures out of the frames on her first day in the house. "What do you think of the picture quality, honey?" The comment read, "I have a full archive. Every day, every hour, including last night's dish-breaking tantrum. What do you think the club you belong to would say if they saw that kind of behavior from your guest?" "Bitch," Raven exhaled, reading over his shoulder. "She's blackmailing us." "No," Theodore said quietly. "She's just showing us the truth." "What truth? That I'm a psychopath? That I caused a riot? That it's okay for her to install hidden cameras? This is her house, and the cameras were here before we—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Before you brought your mistress." Raven laughed hysterically. "Then divorce her. Divorce her now. File for divorce and let her choke on her records." Theodore's phone rang again. This time it was a long message. "Dear Theo and Raven, now that you've discovered the cameras, let's talk frankly. I have a complete recording of your life together in my house. Every conversation, every plan, every attempt to take what doesn't belong to you, including yesterday's threats with the IRS. By the way, Theo, these documents are part of a legitimate board-approved business plan. So not only is Raven a thief, she's also a bad financier. You have a choice. Either you, Raven, quietly pack your bags and disappear from our lives, or this video will be seen by everyone from country club members to your potential yoga clients. The choice is yours. P.S. Theo, we need to talk, but not now." Raven stared at the screen, her face growing paler and paler. "She's bluffing. She wouldn't dare." "She would." Theodore sank tiredly into his chair. "You don't know Marilyn. She never bluffs." "So what now?" Raven's voice became hysterical. "You're just going to give up? Let her manipulate us?" "Us?" He looked up at her. "Raven, look at us. What are we doing? Hiding in corners, afraid of shadows, throwing tantrums. It's no life." "But we love each other." "Don't we?" He grinned bitterly. "Or do you love the idea of being the new Mrs. Abbott? And I was just trying to prove something to myself." The phone beeped again. This time the video showed their first day at the house. Passionate kisses, promises of eternal love, plans for the future. Followed by last night's scandal with the breaking of dishes. "It's amazing how quickly passion passes, isn't it?" The caption read, "Time's up." Raven sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around her head. This is a nightmare. Just a nightmare. And Theodore stared at the phone screen and thought that the real nightmare was what he had done to their marriage. And the worst part is that he doesn't know if it can be fixed. "Going back in 3 days. Hopefully the house will be in the same condition I left it in." Theodore reread the message several times. Just one line, but it reeked of such cold certainty that a chill ran down his spine. "That's impossible." Raven paced around the living room. "She can't just pick up and come back. This is our home." "It's her house," Theodore corrected tiredly, looking around at the mess from last night's tantrum. The shards of a vase still glittered in the corner, and the stain of a dropped wine glass was dark on the wall. "No." Raven turned to him sharply. We've changed everything here. This is our space now. Theodore silently began picking up the shards. 3 days. Just 3 days to decide what to do next. You have to talk to her. Raven squatted down beside him. Explain that we love each other, that you want a divorce. And then what? He looked at her for the first time that morning. You're going to move in here officially? You're going to make a social life for yourself as the new Mrs. Abbott? And the videos of your tantrums just, vaporize? She can't use them. It's illegal. How is it illegal to go through someone else's files and threaten a tax audit? Raven recoiled as if he'd hit her. So you're on her side. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just tired. The day passed in feverish attempts to get the house in order. Theodore called a cleaning service, ordered broken dishes to be replaced, tried to rearrange things. Raven watched the fuss with growing fury. Serving her? Preparing to meet the mistress? By evening, she announced, I'm not going anywhere. Let her come back. We'll see who's who. Raven. No, I'm not giving up. You think I don't have something on you? She shook her phone. I have pictures of documents. I can... What? Theodore asked quietly. Destroy our company? Get back at me by destroying what Marilyn and I have spent years building? Something in his tone silenced her. The next day passed in an oppressive silence. Theodore worked from home, trying to clear up the backlog. Raven locked herself in her bedroom, furiously typing something into her phone. In the evening, she came down for dinner with an unnaturally calm face. I've made up my mind. We're going to meet her together, as a couple. We'll show that we're not afraid of her blackmail. Theodore remained silent, staring at his plate. One more thing. She smiled a strange smile. I've installed cameras too, everywhere. If he tries anything, I'll have proof. Proof of what? He looked up at her tiredly. That the lady of the house had come home? You'll see. Raven rose from the table. Everyone will. That night, Theodore couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about how it had all gone wrong. When had passion turned into obsession? When had admiration for Raven been replaced by fear of her unsteadiness? And somewhere in the darkness of the house, a clock ticked, counting down the hours until Marilyn returned. And in that silence, Theodore suddenly realized that no matter what happened next, there would be no more life. Not for either of them. Marilyn opened the door with her key at exactly 9 in the morning. The house greeted her with an unnatural silence and the smell of fresh baking. Raven was clearly trying to create the image of the perfect hostess. The living room was waiting for them. Raven sat on the sofa with a straight back, dressed as for the reception. A strict dress, impeccable styling, pearl earrings. Theodore stood at the window, nervously rubbing the cufflink on his sleeve. Good morning, Marilyn said calmly, setting her suitcase by the door. I hope you had a good time at my house. Our home, Raven immediately responded. Theodore's still your husband, which means it's time to talk. Marilyn sat back in her chair. About the cameras, for instance. Both the ones I installed to protect the collection and the ones you installed last night. Raven twitched. Were you following us? No, darling. I was protecting my property. But you were really following, checking IDs, going through things, plotting blackmail. That's a lie, Raven jumped up. Theo, tell her. But Theodore remained silent, staring out the window. You know what the funny thing is? Marilyn pulled out his cell phone. I thought you were really in love with him. But then Howard showed up. Howard. Raven went pale. What does that have to do with... Because the pattern is the same. Build trust, create the illusion of passion, and then manipulate. First, the emotional ones. I can't live without you. Drop everything for us. Then domestic, changing the interior, destroying traces of the past life. And finally, trying to gain control of the finances. That's not true. Raven turned to Theodore. I love you. Everything I did. It was a lie, he said quietly. From the beginning. No. She grabbed the vase off the coffee table. You can't do this to me. I have the right. To what? Marilyn asked calmly. To someone else's house, another man's husband, someone else's money. You, Raven swung the vase. You ruined everything. With your cameras, with your ghost games. Oh, so you get it. Marilyn smiled. Yes, the footsteps in the night, the moving objects. That was me. Or rather, the remote control program of the smart house. It's very convenient. You can create any sounds, turn the lights on and off, even move some objects. The vase fell out of Raven's hands. But why? Howard told me about your fears, how you're afraid of the supernatural. I was just using your weakness against you. Raven sank to the couch, covering her face with her hands. You're a monster. No, I'm a businesswoman, a woman who protects what's hers. Marilyn, Theodore finally spoke. I have to explain. Not now, she raised her hand. We need to finish the main thing first. Raven, you have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. Otherwise, the security footage will end up on the internet. You wouldn't dare. You want to check it out? Marilyn showed me her cell phone screen. 1 click and everyone will see your tantrums, threats, blackmail attempts. Raven rose slowly. You'll regret this. No, Marilyn replied calmly. You'll regret it if you don't leave right now. When the sound of Raven's footsteps died down on the 2nd floor, Theodore finally turned to his wife. What now? Now you pack your things and get an apartment. We need time to think. Are you filing for divorce? No, she rubbed her temple tiredly. But I can't forgive yet, so it's time and distance. An hour later, the house was empty. Marilyn sat in her office staring at the screen of her laptop where the cameras were still open. 2 months of someone else's life in her house. Time heals, she thought, closing the files one by one. Or cripples it. Depends on how you use it. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number. Howard? Thanks for your help. Yeah, it's over. Almost. After all, some stories don't end right away. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out what's next. News travels fast in a small town. Within a week of Marilyn's return, everyone was talking about the Abbott scandal. At Theodore's fitness center, there was a new topic of conversation at the front desk. Did you hear that? That yoga instructor. Yeah, with the owner. And his wife recorded the whole thing on the cameras. The first to leave were the high society clients. Mrs. Henderson, the judge's wife, defiantly tore up her club card at the front desk. I don't work out in places where things like this happen. Theodore looked at the falling numbers in the reports and realized for the first time how closely his business was tied to reputation. A reputation that was largely Marilyn's, her connections, her projects, her ability to connect with the right people. Raven was trying to save her name. She gave interviews to the local paper talking about true love and the machinations of a jealous wife. But the camera footage hung over her head like a sword of Damocles. If I were you, I'd leave town, Howard told her during a chance encounter at the supermarket. Start over, while you still have the chance. She silently dropped the shopping cart and ran out of the store. Marilyn, on the other hand, was receiving unexpected support. Her co-workers, customers, even casual acquaintances all felt obliged to express their sympathy and admiration for her fortitude. You did the right thing, Eleanor said over the phone. Protecting what's yours. I'm proud of you. But at night, in the empty house, Marilyn felt neither pride nor satisfaction, only fatigue and a strange emptiness. Theodore rented an apartment in the business district. Every morning he walked past his and Marilyn's favorite cafe, where they had once had breakfast on weekends, and each time his heart clenched with pain and shame. One day he saw her there. She was sitting by the window with a cup of cappuccino and a folder of papers, so familiar and so foreign at the same time. May I? He stopped at her table. She looked up from the papers. Have a seat. I got the papers from your lawyer. Yeah, she sipped her coffee. I think it's best for everyone. Are you sure? Marilyn looked out the window. You know what I've realized these past weeks? Sometimes you have to let go of the past to see if you want it back. Do you? Do you? She didn't answer. Raven left town a month later, quietly, no scandals, no goodbye letters. It was just that one day her yoga class got canceled and her phone stopped ringing. Theodore plunged into work, trying to save the failing business. Without Marilyn's connections, it was harder than he thought. And Marilyn went on with her life, working on new projects, seeing friends, tending to her garden, and little by little she learned to live on her own. You realize he's not going to change, don't you? Eleanor once said. Men like your father or Theodore, they'll always look for validation on the side. I understand, Marilyn replied. But this isn't about him. It's about me. It's about what I want out of life. She stood at the window of her office, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there, in that maze of streets, was Theodore and his problems, and Raven's empty apartment and their shared past. But there was a future ahead, and it required decisions. 6 months passed. Marilyn sat in her consulting firm's new office, looking at the business cards that had just arrived from the print shop. Abbott Consulting. She had decided to keep her husband's last name in the firm's name, even though the divorce had already been finalized. After all, that last name had become part of her professional reputation. The decision to start her own business came out of the blue. One morning she realized that she was tired of working for others, implementing other people's ideas. It was time to create something of her own. The best specialists left the old architectural bureau after her. Now they advised business owners on development issues, from the design of premises to complete reorganization. The phone on the desk rang. Theodore. I heard about your new company, he said after a pause. Congratulations. Thank you. She tapped her pencil on the desk. How are you doing? Honestly, lousy. Half the clients have left, the trainers are quitting. Marilyn remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Yeah, I was wondering. His voice sounded uncertain. Maybe you'd be willing to do some counseling, as a specialist. For money, of course. She smiled. Come back tomorrow at 10. We'll see what we can do. Across town, Raven read a letter from Los Angeles. A well-known chain of wellness centers was offering her a position as a yoga instructor. New city, new life, new opportunities. We've heard about your, conflict in Portland, the letter said. But we believe everyone deserves a second chance. She knew whose job it was, Howard's. He was the only one with connections in the industry. Strangely, the man she'd tried to destroy had reached out to her. The therapy she'd started going to after she left was slowly yielding results. She learned to understand her fears, control impulses, and build healthy relationships. You're no longer trying to be someone else, her therapist said at her last session. That's progress. Theodore was changing too. For the first time in his life, he was alone, without Marilyn's support, without Raven's admiration, without his father's approval. And in that loneliness, he was finally beginning to understand himself. I've always looked for validation of my worth in other people's eyes, he'd said at his meeting with Marilyn. In your respect, in Raven's passion, in my father's recognition. But I never asked myself what I wanted for myself. She listened intently, making notes in her notebook. They could talk now, calmly, without accusations or excuses. You know, she said, closing the notebook, your business needs a rebranding, a complete overhaul of the concept, and maybe you do too. He nodded. I've been thinking about selling off some of the centers. Focus on one, do something special. Like what? Remember we talked about the sports rehabilitation center? That was your idea, but now it can be your idea, she smiled. Your way. In the evening, she sat in her garden watching the sunset. The past no longer weighed her down. It had become an experience to learn from. The phone jingled a message from Howard. Raven has accepted the offer. Thanks for not releasing the notes. Sometimes revenge isn't the best teacher, she replied. Life went on. They were all learning, accepting themselves, letting go of grudges, building something new. And maybe that was the main point of the whole story. Exactly 1 year later, Marilyn stood at the panoramic window of her new office on the 20th floor of a business center. Below was a city drenched in the gilding of autumn. Her company, Abbott Consulting, had grown over the year into one of the state's leading consulting firms. Business Herald magazine had recently included her on its list of 40 successful entrepreneurs under 40. The phone on the desk vibrated. A message from her mother had arrived. Eleanor had finally recovered and was now traveling in Europe, making up for lost years. Meeting a terrific French architect today, she wrote. Never too late to start a new chapter. Marilyn smiled. She'd thought a lot about life over the year, the choices we make, the consequences we have to live with. The crisis in her marriage had, oddly enough, made her stronger. She learned to let go of control, trust her decisions, and not be afraid of change. Across town, in a renovated rehabilitation center, Theodore was finishing up a meeting with investors. His new project, combining sports and psychological rehabilitation, had been an unexpected success. He had sold most of the fitness centers and focused on one really special one. Every night when he locked his office, he thought about how strange life was. After losing everything, his wife, his reputation, part of his business, he'd finally found himself. No longer did he have to conform to anyone's expectations or prove himself. For the first time in his life, he was doing what he thought was right, not what others would approve of. In Los Angeles, Raven was finishing up an evening yoga class at a prestigious wellness center. Her meditation group for people with emotional trauma became popular, perhaps because she really understood their issues. Therapy taught her to see her actions in their true light. She no longer looked for easy paths to success through other people's lives. Her own accomplishments, however small, were more satisfying than all the past attempts to appropriate someone else's. One fall day, Marilyn and Theodore met by chance at their old cafe. He had just signed a contract to expand a rehabilitation center. She was returning from a successful presentation. "Would you keep me company?" he asked, and she said yes. They talked about work, new projects, how their lives had changed over the year. The awkwardness was slowly fading away, giving way to a calm understanding. "You know," Marilyn said, stirring the cooled coffee, "I've been thinking a lot about why things happened the way they did. And I realized it wasn't Raven. She was just the catalyst for what was already happening between us." Theodore nodded. "We were both too caught up in our roles, the successful wife, the wealthy husband. We lost our real selves behind those masks. And now? Now," he thought for a moment. "Now I'm learning to be me. Without looking up to my father, without trying to live up to someone else's standards." Marilyn pulled an envelope out of her bag. Howard sent it. "Raven runs a counseling group in Los Angeles. He says she's good at it." "Weird, isn't it?" Theodore grinned sadly. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find your true calling." They were silent for a while, looking out the window at the people passing by. Each of these passers-by carried his own story, his own victories and defeats, his own life lessons. "I have no regrets," Marilyn said suddenly, "about everything that happened. It was a hard but important experience." "Even the cameras?" he tried to joke. "Even about them," she smiled. "You know what I realized? Sometimes we are so afraid of losing control of the situation that we forget about the most important thing, about ourselves, about our true desires." In the evening, having returned home, Marilyn stood at the window for a long time. The city below shone with lights, promising new possibilities, new stories, new beginnings. She pulled out an old flash drive with surveillance footage. Those 2 months that had turned their lives upside down now seemed like a distant dream. She walked over to the computer, inserted the flash drive, and clicked Delete. The past needed to be let go, not to forget, but to make room for the future. In Los Angeles, Raven was finishing writing a book about personal transformation through crisis. In Portland, Theodore was developing his rehabilitation center, finding satisfaction in helping others. And Marilyn was learning to live in the present without fearing the future or clinging to the past. Life went on, and that was her main wisdom. It always gives a chance to start again. You just have to find the courage to take that chance.